The massive starship drifted silently through the void between worlds, its hull gleaming with strange metals that bent light around its edges. Inside the vessel, Dr. Corvani adjusted her scanning equipment one final time before beginning her work. The blue-skinned scientist had spent 3 centuries cataloging species across the galaxy, and today she would add another entry to the vast database of the Intergalactic Council. Her target was a small, yellow star system on the outer edge of the Milky Way, unremarkable except for the third planet from its sun. The preliminary scans had detected signs of intelligent life, though the readings were confusing and inconsistent. Some signatures suggested advanced technology while others indicated primitive tool use. The contradictions puzzled her, but she had learned long ago that first impressions could be deceiving. The scanning beam swept across the blue-green world below, penetrating its atmosphere and reaching down to the surface. What she found there made her pause. The planet was covered in structures that looked like cities, but they were chaotic and sprawling, lacking the geometric precision that marked truly advanced civilizations. Roads twisted in seemingly random patterns. Buildings of different heights and styles stood side by side, and the entire surface seemed to buzz with frantic activity. The inhabitants themselves were even more puzzling. They called themselves humans, and their biology was surprisingly standard for carbon-based life forms. 2 arms, 2 legs, a head containing their primary processing center, and skin that ranged from pale pink to deep brown. Nothing remarkable there, but their behavior patterns were unlike anything in her extensive files. These humans were constantly in motion, always building, always changing their environment. They fought wars with primitive weapons while simultaneously reaching toward the stars with crude chemical rockets. They poisoned their own atmosphere while creating art of breathtaking beauty. They developed weapons capable of destroying their entire world while also creating medicines that saved millions of lives. Dr. Corvani watched them through her instruments, trying to make sense of their contradictory nature. In the northern continent, she observed humans using electronic devices to communicate across vast distances. In another region, different groups of humans were throwing spears at each other in what appeared to be organized combat. Some humans had built massive structures that touched the clouds, while others lived in simple huts made from mud and straw. The technology readings were equally confusing. These humans had split the atom and harnessed nuclear energy, but they still used animals to pull carts in many regions. They had created global communication networks, but messages often took days to reach their destinations. They had built machines that could calculate billions of operations per second. But these machines were the size of entire rooms and consumed enormous amounts of power. Most disturbing of all was their tendency toward violence. The humans seemed to organize themselves into competing groups based on arbitrary factors like geography, skin color, or belief systems. These groups fought constantly, sometimes with weapons so primitive they involved hitting each other with sharpened metal, other times with explosives that could level entire cities. The death toll from their conflicts was staggering, yet they continued to reproduce at an alarming rate. Dr. Corvani compiled her observations into the standard assessment format. Physical capabilities were average for their size class. Technological development was inconsistent and showed no clear progression from simple to complex. Social organization was chaotic and prone to violent disruption. Mental capacity appeared sufficient for basic problem-solving, but lacked the systematic thinking required for true advancement. The final classification was obvious. These humans showed all the classic signs of a species that would either destroy itself within a few centuries or remain trapped on their homeworld indefinitely. They were too violent and chaotic to develop the social cooperation needed for space travel, too primitive to solve the complex problems of interstellar travel, and too focused on short-term conflicts to plan for long-term survival. She entered the data into the Galactic database. Species designation: human, origin, Sol 3, classification, Class 7, minimal threat, limited potential. Recommendation: passive, observation only. Predicted outcome: self-destruction within 500 local years or permanent planetary confinement. The report was transmitted to the council chambers on the capital world of Nexus, where it joined thousands of similar assessments. The council members barely glanced at it before moving on to more pressing matters. Another primitive species on a backwater world was hardly worth their attention when there were trade disputes to resolve and territorial conflicts to mediate between the established galactic powers. Based on Dr. Corvani's assessment, the council implemented a standard soft quarantine around the Sol system. A few automated monitoring stations were placed at the system's edge, programmed to alert the authorities if anything unusual occurred. The barriers were not meant to keep the humans in, but rather to keep other species from interfering with what was assumed to be a doomed civilization. The quarantine markers were small and subtle, designed to redirect casual traffic away from the system without drawing attention to its existence. Any species advanced enough to detect the markers would understand their meaning and respect the council's decision to leave the humans alone to work out their own destiny. The paperwork was filed, the monitoring stations activated, and the council moved on to other business. Dr. Corvani packed her equipment and prepared to depart for her next assignment, confident that she had correctly assessed another species and helped maintain the order and stability of galactic civilization. In the depths of space, the monitoring stations began their silent vigil, watching for signs of nuclear warfare, ecological collapse, or any other indication that the humans were following their predicted path toward extinction. The stations were programmed to record everything but intervene in nothing. Following the Council's strict non-interference policy for Class 7 species, far below on the planet's surface, the humans continued their chaotic existence, unaware that they had been judged and found wanting by intelligences far beyond their current understanding. They built and destroyed, loved and fought, dreamed and despaired, following patterns that made perfect sense to them but appeared completely irrational to outside observers. The galaxy continued its ancient dance of civilizations rising and falling, of trade and diplomacy, of carefully managed progress and controlled expansion. The humans had been catalogued, classified, and dismissed as irrelevant to the greater cosmic order. In the vast archives of the Intergalactic Council, they were just another entry in an endless list of species that would never matter to anyone. Beyond their own small world, the assessment was complete, the decision made, and the file closed. Humanity had been judged and found unworthy of further consideration. 50 years had passed since the Intergalactic Council had classified humanity as a Class 7 species, and the monitoring stations at the edge of the Sol system had recorded exactly what the experts predicted. The humans had continued their pattern of self-destructive behavior, fighting wars that grew increasingly deadly as their weapons became more sophisticated. They had poisoned their oceans, carved up their forests, and filled their atmosphere with industrial waste. But something unexpected had also occurred during those 5 decades. Instead of destroying themselves as predicted, the humans had begun to change their behavior. The constant warfare had gradually decreased, replaced by increasingly complex forms of cooperation. The environmental destruction had slowed as they developed cleaner technologies. Most surprisingly, their scientific progress had accelerated at an unprecedented rate. Dr. Alex Reed stood in the control room of the research station orbiting Earth, watching the final preparations for what would either be humanity's greatest triumph or its most spectacular failure. The project had taken 15 years to complete, drawing resources and expertise from every nation on the planet. The theories were sound, the calculations checked and rechecked, but nobody had ever attempted anything like this before. The breakthrough had come from an unexpected source. While the established galactic civilizations had developed faster than light, travel through exotic matter manipulation and dimensional folding, humans had approached the problem from a completely different angle. Instead of trying to bend space-time around their vessels, they had focused on quantum entanglement, networks that could create stable corridors through the fabric of reality itself. The concept was so simple that it was almost ridiculous. Take 2 particles, entangle them at the quantum level, separate them by vast distances, and use the instantaneous connection between them to create a tunnel through space. The energy requirements were enormous, the engineering challenges seemed impossible, and the risks of catastrophic failure were substantial. Any rational species would have dismissed the idea as unworkable, but humans had never been particularly rational. They had a tendency to attempt things that logic said were impossible, using brute force and creative problem-solving to overcome obstacles that stopped other species cold. The Quantum Tunnel Project was a perfect example of this approach, combining theoretical physics with the kind of massive engineering effort that humans seem to excel at. Dr. Reed checked the status displays one final time. The enormous ring-shaped device that would generate the quantum tunnel was fully powered and ready. The test ship, UES Defiance, was positioned at the entry point. Its crew of 12 volunteers prepared for a journey that would either make history or end their lives. The destination was a point in space just beyond the monitoring stations, close enough to Earth to return quickly, but far enough to prove that faster-than-light travel was possible. Captain Beth Torres spoke from the bridge of the Defiance, her voice calm despite the magnitude of what they were attempting. "Control, this is Defiance. All systems green, crew ready for departure. We'll see you on the other side." The activation sequence began with a low humming that gradually built to a deep thrumming that seemed to shake the very foundations of the station. Energy readings climbed steadily as the massive generators fed power into the quantum field generators. The space in front of the Defiance began to shimmer and twist, reality bending in ways that human eyes had never seen before. The tunnel opened with a flash of light that briefly outshone the sun. Where empty space had been moments before, there was now a glowing corridor that stretched away into impossibility. The Defiance moved forward slowly, its hull gleaming in the strange light, and then disappeared into the tunnel with a sound like reality tearing apart the monitoring stations. At the edge of the solar system recorded the event with their passive sensors, but their programming did not recognize what they were seeing. The humans had done something that their databases contained no reference for, using a method of faster-than-light travel that did not match any known technology. The automated systems filed the readings as anomalous data and continued their silent watch. 3 days later, the Defiance emerged from quantum tunnel space near one of the monitoring stations, its crew alive and healthy despite traveling a distance that should have taken decades at conventional speeds. The successful test marked the beginning of a new era for humanity, though they had no idea they were being watched by alien technology. Within hours of the first successful test, the quantum tunnel generators were working around the clock to open pathways to nearby star systems. The human approach to space exploration was typically chaotic and ambitious, with dozens of ships launching toward different destinations simultaneously. They had not bothered to send signals ahead or establish communication protocols. They simply went where their curiosity led them. The first contact occurred when a human exploration vessel dropped out of quantum tunnel space directly in front of a routine galactic patrol ship. Officer Thizes, a reptilian being with scales that shifted color based on emotional state, was conducting a standard survey mission when his instruments detected an energy signature that should not have existed. The human ship was crude compared to galactic standards, built from heavy metals and powered by nuclear reactors that seemed almost primitive. But its method of arrival was completely unknown to galactic science. The patrol ship's sensors could not identify the technology that had brought the human vessel to this location, dozens of light years from their homeworld. Officer Thizes opened a communication channel, using the standard galactic greeting protocols. To his surprise, the humans responded in a series of mathematical sequences that indicated intelligence and peaceful intent. Their language was unknown, but they were clearly attempting to establish communication. The conversation that followed was halting and difficult, conducted through mathematics and simple pictures transmitted between the two ships. The humans seemed eager to learn about the galactic community, asking questions about other species, trade routes, and peaceful contact procedures. They showed none of the aggression or primitive behavior that their species profile indicated. Most Disturbing of all was their casual mention of how they had arrived. According to their explanation, they had used something they called quantum tunneling to travel from their homeworld in a matter of hours. The method they described was not just unknown to galactic science. It was considered theoretically impossible by the greatest minds in the galaxy. Officer Theises transmitted an emergency report to the Galactic Council, his scales shifting to deep purple with anxiety. The message was brief but contained information that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. Priority alert, Class 7 species, Sol 3 designation. Human has achieved faster-than-light travel using unknown technology. Current classification appears to be completely inaccurate. Recommend immediate reassessment. The transmission reached the council chambers just as Dr. Corvani was preparing her annual report on monitoring station data. The soft quarantine around. The Sol system had been so quiet that she had almost forgotten about the humans entirely. They were supposed to be destroying themselves or remaining trapped on their homeworld, not traveling between the stars using impossible technology. The council convened an emergency session within hours of receiving the patrol report. The implications were staggering. If the humans had indeed developed faster-than-light travel, then every assumption about their capabilities was wrong. Even more concerning was the possibility that they had somehow acquired galactic technology through unknown means. Dr. Corvani found herself facing a panel of the most powerful beings in the galaxy, all demanding to know how she had so completely misjudged an entire species. Her original assessment had been accepted without question, used as the basis for 50 years of policy decisions. Now it appeared that those decisions had been based on fundamentally flawed assumptions. The evidence was undeniable. The humans had not destroyed themselves as predicted. They had not remained trapped on their homeworld. Instead, they had accomplished something that the greatest civilizations in the galaxy had taken millennia to achieve, and they had done it in a way that challenged the very foundations of galactic science. The age of underestimating humanity was about to end. The emergency session of the Intergalactic Council lasted for 3 days, with representatives from hundreds of species debating the implications of humanity's unexpected advancement. The revelation that a Class 7 species had achieved faster-than-light travel had sent shockwaves through the galactic community, challenging fundamental assumptions about technological development and species classification. Ambassador Quell, a graceful being with silver skin and large, dark eyes that reflected wisdom accumulated over centuries, had been chosen to lead the diplomatic mission to Earth. Her species, the Viridians, were known throughout the galaxy for their analytical minds and peaceful nature. If anyone could unravel the mystery of human advancement, it would be her. The diplomatic vessel GSS Harmony dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system, where the monitoring stations had maintained their silent watch for 5 decades. The stations immediately detected the arrival of the massive ship, its technology far beyond anything the humans had yet displayed. Automated systems began transmitting the standard warnings about the quarantine zone, but Ambassador Quell overrode them with proper council authority codes. As the Harmony approached the inner system, its sensors began detecting human activity that defied all previous assessments. The third planet was still there, still teeming with life, but it was no longer the chaotic world that Dr. Corvani had observed 50 years earlier. The human cities had grown larger and more organized, connected by transportation networks that spanned continents. The atmosphere was cleaner than it had been in decades, suggesting they had solved their environmental problems. More surprising still were the artificial structures in space around the planet. Massive orbital stations rotated slowly in Earth's orbit, their purposes unclear, but their construction indicating a level of engineering sophistication that had not been present in the original survey. Some of the stations were clearly industrial, with spacecraft arriving and departing in regular patterns. Others appeared to be residential, possibly housing thousands of humans, who now lived permanently in space. The most remarkable discovery was the network of quantum tunnel generators that had been constructed throughout the system. The humans had built permanent installations that could open pathways to dozens of different star systems. creating a transportation network that put some galactic civilizations to shame. The scale of the construction indicated that they had been working on this project for years, possibly decades. Ambassador Quell requested permission to approach Earth directly, following proper first contact protocols that had been established millennia ago. The human response was immediate and enthusiastic. Instead of the suspicious or fearful reaction that most species displayed when confronted with vastly superior technology, the humans seemed genuinely excited about the opportunity to meet other intelligent life forms. The first meeting took place aboard the Harmony, with a delegation of human representatives traveling up from Earth to meet with Ambassador Quell. The humans were led by Dr. Patricia Grant, a middle-aged woman with graying hair and eyes that sparkled with curiosity. She was accompanied by representatives from various human governments and organizations, all eager to learn about the galactic community. The conversation began with the standard exchange of basic information about each species' history, culture, and technology. The humans were fascinated by the diversity of life in the galaxy, asking detailed questions about different species and their achievements. They showed particular interest in the peaceful cooperation that existed between most galactic civilizations, noting that such cooperation had been difficult to achieve on their own world. When Ambassador Quell began asking about human technology, particularly their method of faster-than-light travel, Dr. Grant was more than happy to explain. The human approach to the problem had been characteristically direct and unconventional. Instead of trying to understand the elegant mathematics of space-time manipulation, they had focused on the practical problem of moving from one point to another as quickly as possible. The quantum tunnel system was based on the principle of entanglement, a quantum mechanical phenomenon that allowed particles to maintain instantaneous connections regardless of distance. The humans had scaled this up to macroscopic levels by creating stable quantum fields that could maintain entanglement between 2 points in space. The energy requirements were enormous, but they had solved that problem by building fusion reactors that could generate the necessary power. Dr. Grant cheerfully admitted that their method was probably inefficient compared to more elegant solutions, but it worked reliably and could be constructed using materials and techniques that humans understood. She compared it to using a sledgehammer to crack a nut, acknowledging that there were probably more sophisticated approaches, but noting that the sledgehammer got the job done. The simplicity of the explanation was deeply troubling to Ambassador Quell. The humans had solved one of the most complex problems in physics using what they described as a brute force approach. They had not spent centuries developing the theoretical framework that other species considered essential. They had simply identified what they wanted to accomplish and found a way to make it work. Even more disturbing was the scale of human expansion. In the 5 years since they had achieved faster-than-light travel, they had established colonies on more than 30 different worlds. These were not small outposts or research stations, but full-scale settlements with populations in the hundreds of thousands. The humans had identified suitable planets and simply moved there, adapting their technology to local conditions with remarkable speed. The colonial techniques were as unconventional as everything else about human technology. Instead of terraforming planets to match Earth conditions, they had developed adaptive technologies that allowed them to thrive in environments that other species would find impossible. They had colonies on worlds with methane atmospheres, extreme temperatures, and radiation levels that would kill most known life forms. Dr. Grant explained that humans had always been adaptable, having evolved on a world with diverse and often hostile environments. They had learned to modify their technology to suit local conditions, rather than trying to modify the environment to suit their needs. This approach allowed them to establish successful colonies much more quickly than traditional terraforming methods. The conversation continued for hours, with Ambassador Quell asking increasingly detailed questions about human society, technology, and future plans. The humans were remarkably open about their activities, sharing information that most species would consider sensitive or classified. They seemed to have no concept of the strategic implications of their technological advantages. When Asked about their military capabilities, the humans admitted that their colonial expansion had been entirely peaceful so far. They had encountered no hostile species and had no immediate plans for military development beyond what was necessary for self-defense. Their focus was on exploration, scientific research, and the establishment of new human communities throughout the galaxy. The admission that humanity had no significant military preparations was perhaps the most alarming revelation of all. The humans had developed technology that could revolutionize space travel, established colonies throughout multiple star systems, and created a transportation network that connected dozens of worlds. They had accomplished all of this without considering the possibility that other species might view their rapid expansion as a threat. Ambassador Quell concluded the meeting with formal exchanges of diplomatic protocols and promises of continued communication. The humans were invited to send representatives to the galactic capital for formal recognition as a spacefaring civilization. They accepted the invitation with enthusiasm, apparently unaware that their rapid advancement had caused panic in certain quarters of the galactic community. As the Harmony prepared to depart, Ambassador Quell compiled her report for the Council. The humans were not primitive savages who had somehow stolen advanced technology. They were a genuinely intelligent species that had developed their own unique solutions to complex problems. Their technology was different from galactic standards, but it was undeniably effective. The implications were staggering. If the Council's assessment of humanity had been so completely wrong, how many other species had been similarly misjudged? How many potential allies or threats had been dismissed as irrelevant based on flawed assumptions? The report transmitted to the Council chambers would mark the beginning of a fundamental reassessment of galactic civilization's approach to first contact and species classification. The humans had proven that intelligence and capability could take forms that established civilizations had never imagined. The age of human expansion was just beginning, and the galaxy was about to discover that underestimating humanity had been a mistake of cosmic proportions. The news of humanity's rapid expansion spread through the galaxy like wildfire, carried by trade ships, diplomatic vessels, and the vast communication networks that connected established civilizations. The reaction was mixed, with some species expressing curiosity and others showing concern about the implications of such rapid growth by a previously unknown civilization. The Drakmor Empire, a militaristic society that had dominated their region of space for over 1,000 years, viewed the human expansion with particular alarm. Their territory bordered several of the star systems where humans had established colonies, and their military strategists were deeply concerned about the implications of human technology and rapid population growth. War Commander Thane stood before the assembled High Council of the Drakmor Empire, his scaled hide gleaming with the ceremonial armor that marked his rank. The Drakmor were a proud warrior race, evolved from predators that had once hunted in the deep canyons of their homeworld. They had built their empire through military conquest and maintained their dominance through superior technology and tactical excellence. The holographic display showed the expanding sphere of human colonization, with new settlements appearing faster than Drakmor intelligence could track them. Each new colony represented a potential threat to Drakmor security, and the unconventional human technology made it impossible to predict their capabilities or intentions. War Commander Thane presented his analysis to the Council with the precision that had made him one of the Empire's most successful military leaders. The humans had established colonies on worlds that the Drakmor considered uninhabitable, using technology that seemed to adapt to local conditions with remarkable efficiency. Their transportation network allowed them to move resources and personnel between widely separated systems almost instantaneously. Most concerning was the human approach to colonization itself. Unlike established galactic civilizations that expanded slowly and carefully, maintaining strong connections to their homeworld, the humans seemed to establish independent colonies that could survive and thrive without support from Earth. This decentralized approach made them extremely difficult to defeat through conventional military strategies. The Drakmor had built their empire by identifying the homeworld of target species, and either conquering it directly or threatening it to force. Surrender. The human colonial network had no central point of failure, no single target that could be struck to cripple their entire civilization. Even if Earth itself were destroyed, the human colonies would continue to exist and expand. The council debate lasted for days, with various factions arguing for different approaches to the human problem. Some advocated for diplomatic contact, following the example of Ambassador Quell and the Intergalactic Council. Others suggested economic pressure or technological sabotage. But War Commander Thane argued for a direct military solution before the humans could expand further. The decision was made to launch a preemptive strike against the human colony of New Haven, a world that had been settled only 3 years earlier but already housed over 500,000 humans. The attack would serve multiple purposes. It would demonstrate Drakmor military superiority, provide intelligence about human defensive capabilities, and potentially slow their expansion while the Empire prepared for a larger campaign. The Drakmor battle fleet assembled at the edge of their territory, a formidable force of warships that had conquered dozens of worlds over the centuries. The fleet was commanded by War Commander Thane personally, leading 300 vessels equipped with the most advanced weapons and defensive systems in the Drakmor arsenal. The approach to New Haven was carefully planned to maximize the element of surprise. The Drakmor used their conventional faster-than-light drives to approach the system from an unexpected direction, avoiding the quantum tunnel routes that humans typically used for interstellar travel. Intelligence suggested that the human colony had minimal defensive capabilities, relying primarily on their transportation network to evacuate personnel in case of emergency. The battle began at dawn on New Haven, with Drakmor warships dropping out of faster-than-light travel in orbit around the colony world. The initial bombardment was intended to disable the quantum tunnel generators and prevent human reinforcements from arriving. The Drakmor expected the colony to surrender within hours of the attack beginning. Instead, they encountered a defense that defied all their expectations and assumptions. The human colony had been built with military defense in mind, despite its apparent focus on civilian settlement. The colonists had modified their industrial equipment to serve as weapons, turning mining lasers into orbital defense guns and cargo haulers into improvised warships. Commander Lisa Torres, a former military officer who had helped establish the colony, took charge of the defense with a combination of tactical skill and creative problem-solving that caught the Drakmor completely off guard. Instead of trying to match the superior technology of the Drakmor fleet, she focused on using human advantages, adaptability, unconventional tactics, and the ability to turn civilian infrastructure into military assets. The mining platforms that orbited New Haven became weapons platforms, using their industrial equipment to launch projectiles and energy beams at the Drakmor ships. The cargo vessels that normally transported supplies between the surface and orbital installations were converted into fast attack ships, using their superior maneuverability to strike at vulnerable points on the larger Drakmor vessels. Most effective of all was the human use of their quantum tunnel network. While the Drakmor had successfully disabled the main generators, the humans had built redundant systems throughout the colony that could be activated quickly. Instead of evacuating, they used the tunnels to bring in reinforcements and supplies from other human colonies, turning what should have been an isolated target into a node in a vast support network. The battle that the Drakmor had expected to last hours stretched into days, then weeks. The human defense was chaotic and unpredictable, using tactics that violated every principle of conventional warfare. They sent civilian spacecraft on suicide missions to disable Drakmor command ships, used construction equipment to build defensive installations in real time, and adapted their strategies constantly based on observed enemy behavior. War. Commander Thane found himself fighting an enemy that refused to follow the rules of war as he understood them. The humans did not retreat when outnumbered, did not surrender when their position became hopeless, and did not respect the distinction between military and civilian targets. They used every resource at their disposal, turning their entire colony into a weapon that could strike back at the invaders. The turning point came when human engineers managed to board and capture a disabled Drakmor warship. Within hours, they had begun reverse engineering its technology, adapting Drakmor weapons and defensive systems to human specifications. The speed of their technological adaptation was unprecedented, allowing them to field improved defenses almost as quickly as the Drakmor could develop new attacks. The final phase of the battle saw the human defenders launching a counterattack against the Drakmor fleet using a combination of captured technology and their own innovations. The attack was coordinated through their quantum tunnel network, with reinforcements arriving from multiple human colonies to support the defense of New Haven. The Drakmor fleet, reduced to less than half its original strength, was forced to retreat after suffering the first major military defeat in their empire's history. The humans had not just survived the attack, they had captured several Drakmor vessels and demonstrated that their rapid technological adaptation made them a formidable opponent in any extended conflict. The news of the Drakmor defeat spread throughout the galaxy even faster than the original reports of human expansion. The idea that a species that had been classified as Class 7 only decades earlier could defeat one of the galaxy's most powerful military forces was almost impossible to accept. Yet the evidence was undeniable. The humans had won a decisive victory. Against overwhelming odds, the Battle of New Haven marked a fundamental shift in galactic politics. The humans were no longer seen as primitive colonists expanding into empty space, but as a potential major power that could defend themselves against any threat. Their unconventional approach to warfare had proven as effective as their unconventional approach to technology, war. Commander Thane returned to the Drakmor Empire with his surviving ships, carrying news that would shake the foundation of their military doctrine. The humans had not defeated them through superior technology or overwhelming force, but through adaptability and creative thinking that turned their own strengths against them. The galaxy was beginning to understand that humanity's greatest weapon was not their technology or their numbers, but their refusal to accept limitations that other species considered absolute. They had proven that underestimating them was not just a mistake, but a potentially fatal error that could cost entire civilizations their dominance. The age of human expansion was entering a new phase, one where they would be respected as equals, rather than dismissed as primitives. The galaxy would never be the same. 5 years after the Battle of New Haven, the galactic political landscape had transformed beyond recognition. The human victory over the Drakmor Empire had sent shockwaves through every established civilization, forcing a complete reassessment of military doctrine, diplomatic protocols, and fundamental assumptions about technological development and species capability. The intergalactic council chambers on the capital world of Nexus buzzed with activity as representatives from hundreds of species gathered for the most significant session in galactic history. For the first time since the Council's formation 3 millennia earlier, a species that had been initially classified as Class 7 was being formally recognized as a major galactic power and invited to join the Council as a full member. President Emma Foster stood at the entrance to the Great Chamber, preparing to address the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. She was a relatively young woman by human standards, chosen to lead Earth's government partly because of her experience in interstellar diplomacy and partly because she represented humanity's optimistic approach to the future. The chamber itself was a marvel of galactic engineering, a vast space that could accommodate thousands of beings with different atmospheric and gravitational requirements. The architecture was designed to be aesthetically pleasing to as many species as possible, incorporating design elements from across the galaxy into a harmonious whole that spoke to the unity of purpose that the Council represented. As president, Foster took her place at the speaker's podium. She could see the faces of beings from across the galaxy looking at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to respect to barely concealed fear. The humans had proven that they were not the primitive species that had been dismissed decades earlier, but their rapid rise to prominence had created uncertainty about their intentions and capabilities. Dr. Corvani sat in the section reserved for scientific advisors, Her blue skin slightly darker than it had been 50 years earlier when she had first cataloged humanity as a minimal threat. She had spent the past 5 years studying human technology and society, trying to understand how she had so completely misjudged their potential. Her final report on human capabilities had become required reading for xenobiologists throughout the galaxy. The address began with President Foster acknowledging the remarkable journey that had brought humanity to this moment. She spoke of the challenges that her species had faced in developing space travel, the difficulties of establishing colonies on distant worlds, and the conflicts that had tested their resolve and capabilities. She was honest about human shortcomings, while emphasizing their determination to learn and grow. The centerpiece of her address was the announcement of the Open Innovation Initiative, a program that would fundamentally change how technology and knowledge were shared throughout the galaxy. Instead of the traditional approach where each species closely guarded their technological advantages, humanity was proposing a system of open exchange that would benefit everyone. The concept was revolutionary in its simplicity. Humans would share their quantum tunnel technology, their adaptive colonization techniques, and their approaches to rapid technological development with any species that wanted to learn. In exchange, they hoped to gain access to the accumulated knowledge and wisdom of galactic civilization. Learning from species that had been developing for millennia, the proposal was met with initial skepticism from many council members. The traditional galactic approach to technology sharing involved careful negotiation, formal treaties, and extensive safeguards to prevent misuse. The human approach seemed recklessly open, lacking the protections that had maintained stability for thousands of years. Ambassador Quell, now serving as the Council's primary liaison with humanity, stood to address the concerns that many representatives were expressing. She had spent years studying human society and had come to understand that their approach to cooperation was fundamentally different from established galactic norms. They seemed to believe that sharing knowledge made everyone stronger rather than creating dangerous vulnerabilities. The debate that followed was intense and wide-ranging, touching on issues of security, economic stability, and the potential consequences of rapid technological dissemination. Some species worried that human technology could be used by hostile civilizations to threaten galactic peace. Others were concerned about the economic disruption that could result from sudden technological advancement. President Foster responded to each concern with patience and practical examples. She pointed out that human colonies had been established peacefully, often in cooperation with existing galactic civilizations. She noted that human technology had been used defensively in the conflict with the Drakmor, demonstrating that it could help maintain peace rather than threaten it. The most compelling argument came from the practical results that had already been achieved through human cooperation with other species. The joint research station orbiting the gas giant in the Kepler system had produced breakthrough discoveries in energy generation that were already benefiting multiple civilizations. The agricultural techniques developed on New Haven had been adapted by 3 different species to improve food production on their own worlds. Dr. Corvani rose to present her final assessment of humanity, a document that would formally replace her original classification from 50 years earlier. She admitted to the assembled representatives that her initial evaluation had been based on flawed assumptions and inadequate understanding of human potential. She had measured them by standards that reflected galactic norms rather than recognizing their unique strengths. The new assessment painted a completely different picture of humanity. They were classified as a Class 1 species with unlimited potential for technological and social development. Their greatest strength was identified as their adaptability and willingness to attempt solutions that other species considered impossible. Their weakness was acknowledged as a tendency toward overconfidence and a sometimes reckless disregard for established safety protocols. The formal vote on human membership in the Intergalactic Council was closer than many had expected, but the final result was decisive. 2/3 of the member species voted to grant humanity full membership, recognizing them as equals in the galactic community. The remaining third abstained rather than voting against, indicating acceptance, if not enthusiasm, for the decision. The ceremony that followed was unprecedented in Council history. President Foster was invited to take the oath of membership on behalf of her entire species, promising to uphold the principles of peaceful cooperation and mutual respect that had guided galactic civilization for millennia. The oath was administered in Earth's primary language, with translation provided for species that could not process human vocal patterns. The celebration extended beyond the council chambers to human colonies throughout the galaxy. On New Haven, the world that had proven human military capability, colonists gathered in the rebuilt Central Plaza to watch the ceremony broadcast across the quantum tunnel network. The memorial to those who had died defending the colony stood nearby, a reminder of the price that had been paid for recognition and respect. The aftermath of the council session saw immediate changes in galactic politics and economics. Several species requested access to human quantum tunnel technology, offering their own innovations in exchange. The Viridians shared their advances in biological engineering, while the crystalline architects provided insights into structural design that could revolutionize human construction techniques. Most significantly, the Open Innovation Initiative began to change how the galaxy approached technological development. Instead of each species working in isolation, multi-species research teams began forming to tackle challenges that had seemed insurmountable when approached from a single perspective. The combination of human adaptability with galactic wisdom proved to be extraordinarily productive. War Commander Thane, who had led the failed attack on New Haven, requested a private meeting with President Foster during her visit to Nexus. The encounter was tense but respectful, with the Drakmor military leader acknowledging that his understanding of warfare had been fundamentally changed by his encounter with human defensive tactics. The conversation between the former enemies revealed the broader implications of humanity's rise to galactic prominence. The Drakmor Empire had begun incorporating human tactical innovations into their own military doctrine, while humans had learned valuable lessons about the importance of preparation and strategic thinking from their conflict with a more experienced military power. The meeting concluded with an unexpected announcement. The Drakmor Empire and humanity would establish a joint military academy, where officers from both civilizations could learn from each other's approaches to conflict and defense. The program would serve as a model for cooperation between species with very different military traditions. Dr. Corvani presented her final report to the Council's Xenobiology Department, officially closing the file on humanity's initial classification and opening a new chapter in galactic understanding of species development. Her conclusions would reshape how first contact protocols were conducted, emphasizing the importance of long-term observation and the danger of premature classification. The report identified several key factors that had led to the initial misassessment of human potential. The tendency to judge other species by galactic standards rather than recognizing unique evolutionary paths. The assumption that technological development followed predictable patterns. The failure to recognize that apparent weaknesses could actually be sources of strength in the right circumstances. Most importantly, the report recommended fundamental changes to the Council's approach to newly discovered species. Instead of quick classification and isolation, new protocols would emphasize extended observation, cultural exchange, and the recognition that intelligence and capability could take forms that established civilizations had never encountered. The galaxy entered a new era of cooperation and discovery, driven by the recognition that diversity of thought and approach was a strength rather than a weakness. Human colonies continued to expand, but now they did so as part of a larger galactic community rather than as isolated outposts of a single species. The quantum tunnel networks that had initially been a uniquely human technology became the foundation for a galaxy-wide transportation system that connected civilizations in ways that had never been possible before. Trade, cultural exchange, and scientific cooperation flourished as travel between distant worlds became routine rather than a major undertaking. President Foster concluded her historic address with a simple but profound observation about the nature of galactic civilization, and the importance of embracing change rather than fearing it. She noted that humanity's greatest contribution to the galaxy was not their technology or their military capability, but their demonstration that progress came from questioning assumptions and attempting the impossible. The assembled representatives gave her a standing ovation that lasted for several minutes, a gesture of respect that transcended species boundaries and cultural differences. The humans had proven that they belonged among the great civilizations of the galaxy, not through conquest or dominance, but through their willingness to share their gifts and learn from others. As the session concluded and representatives began to depart for their homeworlds, the galaxy was already changing in response to humanity's influence. The age of isolation and careful competition was ending, replaced by an era of open cooperation and shared discovery that would benefit all species. The Council's mistake in underestimating humanity had become the catalyst for the greatest transformation in galactic civilization since the founding of the Intergalactic Council itself. The future belonged to those who were willing to embrace change, adapt to new challenges, and recognize that strength came from unity rather than dominance. Humanity had found its place among the stars, not as conquerors or outsiders, but as partners in the greatest adventure that intelligent life had ever undertaken. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly what it needed to continue, growing and thriving in a universe full of infinite possibilities.